Hi everybody, welcome back to Starfish Design. So today I'm going to be showing you my simple process that I do every time I create these beautiful charcuterie boards with my ocean resin design. I use the same steps every time and it gives me a flawless finish, and it's really easy way to set up quite a few boards all at once or to just create one board. So in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you some really basic tips and tricks that work for me, and I'm sure that they'll work for you if you just follow along. So let's get started. So the wood that I'm using for my charcuterie board is a macrocarpa timber. What I have made sure I create these boards here, they're milled here, and I cut and shape the boards. What you want to make sure when you're working with certain timbers is that you remove any oils and sheens that they might have. That will help to reduce the likelihood of tannins being released from the oils or lacquers or the natural timbers. And when the tannins release, they can give off those pesky little bubbles that we don't want. So you want to make sure that your working surface is level and your project is level. If it is not level, what happens, because resin is self-leveling, it will naturally flow towards the lowest point. So you might have a beautiful finish on your project, but it may not be level, and what will happen over that first few hours of curing is your design will just slowly disappear off the side of the board, and it will change the character of the ocean resin design that you have poured. So level surface is a must. Working on the back side of the board, I take basic painter's masking tape, and I'm going to tape off the outside of this board underneath. So what we want to do, we're applying the tape, I'm pushing it firmly down on those edges, and what I've done is I have just started the tape on the slightly inside that edge, and that means when the resin flows over the side it doesn't get caught on the masking tape. Okay, so the next tip I'm going to give you is I like to gesso, depending on how you say that, my design on the board first. So to me it is for two reasons. One being it provides a neutral barrier between the timber or the substrate that you're working with and the resin, which helps to reduce any tannins releasing and causing bubbles in your work. It also helps you to visualize your design. So in this board, for instance, I have painted my gesso under here. I've painted the edges so that I get a beautiful waterfall effect, and I have looked at my timber, I've looked at the grain, and I've thought about the kind of shape that I want to create. So you don't need a thick coat of gesso, it just needs to be a nice even coat, and we don't want to have any big blobs of paint on the design. So you also want to paint the corresponding edges, and that means that your waterfall edge will have a nice finish. So another reason that this is a great thing to do, if you're working with any paints with beautiful colours, pouring a resin on a white base will give you the best colour pop. So if you want your colours to stay nice and true to themselves, then I recommend painting. So this gesso is completely hidden away, so you will not see this once we pour our resin design. Alright, so I'll run you through my setup. So what I like to do is set all of my colours up, my cups. I'm using just standard paper cups because these are perfect for squishing together and making a little pouring spout. I've got my colours, these are all from Just Resin in Australia, and I will be listing them in the description if you're interested in purchasing similar colours. I have little wooden stirring sticks which you can pick up from any craft store. They are ideal for mixing your resin. I'm using today for this project, I'm using Just Resin in Australia's Ocean Coat resin. It's a beautiful resin that's quite thick and it creates beautiful ocean wave lacing. My 2-pot is 1:1 mix ratio. My 2 pots are sitting in a little warm bath. So your resin must be warm to get the best flow and consistency. But if it is cold, it will be cloudy. It will be a lot harder for the resin to self-release those bubbles. So very important just to get your resin to a nice warm consistency. So I just like stick my 2 pots. This is a little warm bath. It's not too hot. I've just got my finger in there while I'm setting up my studio. These 2 are sitting in there just warming up quite nicely. So I've got my isopropyl alcohol here and my paper towel, and of course my Ryobi 2000 watt heat gun. This tool is my go-to. It does everything that I need. I like to have a narrow head tip on my heat gun. That gives me more control over the direction of my flow for my resin work. So a lot of heat guns come with a wider surface. If you want more control over the direction of your ocean wave lacing, then I recommend finding one that will give you a bit more control, and that is by having a narrow head on it. So we're just going to pop that there. Alright, so, and of course we have our rubber gloves. If you're working with resin, you want to wear rubber gloves so that you do not get the resin on your hands. We don't want any drips of water going into the resin, so we'll get rid of that. Just going to dry that one. So this resin's a 1:1 ratio resin, which is super easy to work out. All right. So what I like to do is pour the hardener into the epoxy resin because this is a lot more fluid and it's easier to get it out of this cup. You want to make sure that you get all of the resin out of this cup. So I'm just going to hold my cup on the table, and you can see that that's nice and fluid, and that's from sitting in the warm pot. So I'm going to scrape the sides here. I'm folding it, changing direction. I'm going quite fast and firm, but I'm not going like a crazy person because I do not want to create a froth. I'm just changing direction. So the resin at the moment, if you can see here, is quite cloudy, and you can see the streaks in it. That just shows me this has got a long way to go before it's ready. So I'm changing that direction. You can see the streaks in there. That's just where the two hardener and the epoxy are still quite separated. So if you look at my resin now, you'll see that those streaks have gone, and all that we have in here now is quite clear resin, but bubbles. And the bubbles are okay. It doesn't matter about the bubbles. People get hung up on the bubbles. but the bubbles will be gone at the right time. So I'm just giving that last bit there. So I'm just going to pour off a little bit of white in there. And then the clear, I like to put a little bit of pearl luster in it. I think that adds a really nice effect. And then these four colours will be quite evenly distributed. So a wee bit there. So in this cup, there's probably about 1/4 of a cup of resin in here. So I'm using Midnight Blue from Just Resin in Australia. It's a beautiful colour. So I'm going to add less than I need. We're going to pop that much in. Pop it in here. We're going to give it a good stir. So what I like to do, you're mixing your colour really well, making sure that it's thoroughly mixed with the resin. And then I do a little test. So I'm going to hold that up and I'm going to let it self-level on the stick. It's hard to show on this camera edge, but you can actually start to see the stick. That tells me I need to add a little bit more pigment paste to this to make it a nice opaque colour. So I get a new stick because I don't want to dip my epoxy in here, and I'm going to add some more pigment paste. So this is going to give me a nice strong colour on my board. The pearl, which I like to put into the clear, I only have a little bit of clear here. So we're just going to add a little bit of that pearl. And that's just going to add a little bit of oomph to that clear line that we apply before the white. It's another quite a cool little option, and this is such a beautiful colour. There it is there. Okay, so now that we've mixed all of our colours, I'm going to pour on my lightest colour first, which is the baby blue in here. And I'll be taking my stick out, put it in my rubbish bag under the table, pinching it, and I am going to cover this line. So what I do is I'm going to pour my resin along that line, and you want to go quite fast, because if you go slow when you're pouring, you will get like speed wobbles. So you want to go relatively fast. I'm going to put some up here on my handle. And now I'm just going to backfill it. I just want a nice coating of resin. I want it to waterfall off my board nicely. So you want to make sure that you've applied enough. Okay, so the next colour I'm using is this beautiful Caribbean, and I'm going to be pouring that beside the blue. And then I'm going to start backfilling it. So let's go for it. Sapphire, gorgeous colour. Rubbish bag, pinching my cup, perfect little cup pourer. Same thing, we're going to go behind that green and backfilling it. Let's let that dribble over. And lastly, this beautiful strong midnight blue. Pinching my pot and pouring it on here. So whatever colour you put on this back edge is the colour that you will lose the most over the side. So if you really love this dark blue, you need to bring it in a wee bit further. I'm just going to bring that down here because this is just all going to fall off that edge. Drizzle a wee bit over here. Got all my colours on. Now I'm going to take my heat gun for the very first time. I put this on the low setting, which on this heat gun is a number 1. All I want to do is just pop those little bubbles. So I'm putting it on number 1. One pass. You see the bubbles popping. That is it. No more. If I keep heating this up, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner and will start to fall off the board. So what we want to make sure now is that your edges are wet. So we're just going to wipe our hand right along that edge and we're going to cover any parts of the dry wood. And the reason being, when you get the waterfall, you don't want any friction. I'm going to do it on the inside here. We're just wetting it. So the resin will, as it hits the dry wood, will go around it with the friction. We don't want that. So that is why I wet those edges. Very light touch. I've got quite firm gloves here. I'm just going to drag my fingers along very carefully. And I'm not pushing hard, I'm just very gently bringing that navy, that midnight blue down, blending, bringing these colours together. So this is just, I like to go in the direction of my design rather than, I don't go like that, I go long ways. So what we're doing is we're smoothing out the joins without using a heat gun. And this will mean that your work is blended. You won't get any of those lines between the colours, but you haven't overheated it. So that is looking pretty good. So what you want to do next is unfortunately, my video stopped, so I poured the line without you guys seeing. So I'm just going to show you again. I'm using my pearl white here, but you can use clear, which is what most people would use. I just like to throw in a little pop of pearl. I pour it along the edge, so it goes between the wood and that lightest color. So I'll just pop some more on here just to show you since my video didn't work. Let's go. And you want to pour that quite quickly. You can make this as wide as you like, it doesn't really matter. And we're just going to pour some over here. That's it. So this is what most people would use clear for. So now with the white, you must mix a strong white. If your white is wishy-washy, you will not get the lacing effects that you dream of. So we pinch the cup. We're going to be pouring this along the edge of that pearl that we just put. So we're going to go long, and we're going quite fast so that we don't get the speed wobbles. There we go. So the thicker you make this, the white, the more white will be on your board. So just be mindful of that if you don't really want too much of a white line. I like a lot of white because I normally do a second pour. This is how it looks, okay? So we've got all our colours on. Now we're ready to bubble pop, heat gun again. I'm just holding this by hand. And then we're gonna pop these bubbles, and then I'm gonna turn this up to a high setting, and I will show you how I push my waves out. So let's pop the bubbles first. Low setting. this is also just preparing your work for the blast. Okay, so very quickly do that. I do not keep going. I don't overdo my bubble popping. What I will do now is I'm going to put this up to a high setting. I hold my gun like this, not like that. So it's like this, and I go like that, okay? That's how I push my waves out. I don't go like this. That's just my preference, and that is what works for me. I go push and push and push. Okay, so I'm going to turn this on. I won't be able to talk because it's really noisy, but hopefully you'll get to see how I do it. So we're going and we're pushing. 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 And you can see the white is going over the top of the pearl. So second pass is where I shimmy it. I'm shimmying it out. And this is creating the waterfall effect over the edge. And it's also breaking up my lines. So let's just give that another wee shimmy. That's enough on there. Coming around here. Push and push. And that is it. Less is more, people. There's little bubbles appearing, which is cool. We don't care about them at the moment. The resin's waterfalling nicely off the sides. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a little bit of white on these two bits here, which is a little bit thin because I like a bold, strong 3D line. You'll see that lacing there. See those wee bubbles? Leave them. Do not touch those bubbles. Let them breathe and release. The temptation here is to keep heat gunning it, but you'll see them actually rising and popping by themselves. And I leave this for 20 minutes. Then I will go over it with a very low heat just to catch those last few little bubbles. But you see some cool lacing. So let's see. All right. So what I'm going to do, I take my white. I've got a little stick here. I'm just going to run that over the edge. And that just gives me a really bold 3D line. You want to go around the edges, just make sure that there's no little bits that are missing, and you want to just dab on those joins. You don't, at this point we're not wiping anymore, we're dabbing, because what it will do is just flow down. So now we're just leaving it, we're letting these little bubbles release and do their thing. But we've got some really good lacing here, as you can see. It's looking pretty good. Okay, so it's been approximately 20 minutes. You can see that most of those bubbles have gone. What I like to do now that I've let my board rest and settle is just go over it with a very low setting of the heat gun, and that will take out the very last bubbles. So there's very few on there. There's just a don't know if you can see, just one way there. So we're just going to give it a low setting. We're just going to go over, and that is just removing those last little, helping the resin release. And that's, so now we have no bubbles. Is pretty cool. So you can come back in another 20 minutes and do the same again if you do get the odd little bubble popping up. Do not keep applying heat, do not overheat it, and you'll probably find that this is all that you need to do. I've got this in a warm room now and I'm just going to let it cure, as you do with all your resin projects. Strong, we've got a really nice waterfall edge happening and everything is looking pretty good. And those bubbles have gone. Just like that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. I'm just going to leave my board to cure in this warm room for the next 5 to 7 days. You can cover it if you want to avoid getting hairs and little dust specks on it. Otherwise, if you've got any questions, just comment and I'll try and answer them for you. Otherwise, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.